This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am your host, Andy Steele. My guest tonight is Dan Barnum. Dan is on the board of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and he's going to be talking about the new resolution that's being submitted to the American Institute of Architects conference this year from AE 9/11 Truth, calling on that organization to call for a new investigation into the destruction of World Trade Center 7 on 9/11. We'll be talking about that, all the great things associated with that, and if anybody is following this show for any length of time, you'll know that we did it last year. It wasn't successful other than publicly educating more people, but we are not going to quit. We're going to keep on coming back. We got more signatories to the resolution this year, and that number is going to continue to grow. This is how you win, folks. It's just you don't quit. You keep on punching. I think it's no coincidence that the conference is in Philadelphia this year. That's the city that Rocky took place in. And if you know your movies, you know that in the first movie, Rocky didn't win the decision, but in Rocky 2, he did win. So that's the inspiration I'm taking with me as I go to Philadelphia, and that's the spirit that we need to fire ourselves up with. So I know I'm excited about it. A lot of people in the 9/11 Truth movement are excited about this, and if you are just as passionate about getting a new investigation into World Trade Center 7 as we are, we need your help. All right, we're going to be doing everything we can to make sure the delegates are educated about World Trade Center 7. That's why we included so much evidence in this new resolution. That's how it's different from last year's. Last year's was shorter. This is going to have more evidence included in it, so they got to read it all before they vote on it. We got to do our outreach, too, to the local chapters before the meetings take place. We're really going to be expanding our outreach efforts to get to these people before they just listen to somebody at a business meeting, make an emotional argument, and base their decisions off of that in the heat of the moment. All right, and some of that's going to include having conversations with the delegates at the conventions, and also, some of the stuff that we're going to be reaching out to them with prior as well. So there's going to be some big stuff going on, and we need all of your help. So if you don't know how to help and you want to, give whatever assistance you can go to ae911truth.org, ae911truth.org, our website, and by the time the show airs, there should be a banner making reference to this year's AIA conference that you can click on. You just scroll down, the banner will be on the page where all the other banners are. You click it and donate whatever you can. This is how you fight. You fight with your dollars. Every major movement in the history of our nation and other nations have needed money to make things happen. So even if you can just donate $5 to help out with this, it will go a long way. We are certainly doing everything we can here at AE 9/11 Truth to get the word out. So again, go to ae911truth.org. By the time the show airs, there should be a banner on the page referencing the AIA conference. You just scroll down, click that, and see what you can give. All right, before I play my interview with Dan Barnum, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take our 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11, their families, and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that starting now. And that's 10 seconds.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Dan Barnum is an architect with a career spanning 5 decades, having participated in the design of a wide variety of building types, from small home remodeling projects to Houston's Astrodome and several high-rise office buildings. He's an FAIA, and he served in the United States Navy for 3 years, active duty. The final year was in Vietnam as an advisor to the Vietnamese Navy. He's currently on the board for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. We're going to be talking about our next exciting project here as we go to the AIA conference. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So please elaborate on your background, anything that I left out.
Well, that's the gist of it. The part for 9/11 Truth, I think, is interesting in that on the day of 9/11, I walked into my office, and at that time I was part of a small firm. We had about a dozen architects, and one of my partners said an airplane has just crashed into the World Trade Center, and my initial reaction, well, that's okay. It was designed to withstand the impact of a 707, and I voiced something like that, and he said, well, it appears not to have been accidental, and we had a small TV in the office, and so we pulled it out and set it up in the conference room, and we were watching, and there was all sorts of things that were waving flags for me, and I kept trying to tell this to my colleagues in my office, and they were saying, "Oh, no, this is different," and so yes, I've known from the very beginning that there was something fishy going on.
Now, did your colleagues give you any kind of argument other than no? I mean, the TV just said it was structural damage and it fell. Did they actually try to debate you on what probably? I know we didn't have an official story at that point yet, even though the media was trying its hardest to give us one. But was there any kind of argument back and forth of what they had just witnessed in the technical aspects of it?
Well, no, because even I was shocked about. Everybody was sort of shocked about what was going on, and you watching this and watching people jump out of buildings and then pretty soon the buildings are collapsing, and how can this be? I don't, it's been too long. I don't remember what I was saying, but I was saying, I know I was at least thinking, wait a minute, the buildings are designed, the Twin Towers are designed to withstand the 707, and whatever those planes were that were hitting the building, they're not a whole lot more massive than a 707, so they're not going to cause those buildings to fall down. That's not going to happen, and they replay the collapse, and you can clearly see that there's small explosions going on, and so I'm saying, okay, this is an implosion, and by this we told everybody to go home, and but the next day, talking to colleagues, I'm saying this was all planned in advance, and they're saying, oh no. Because by then the seeds had been planted for this was done by 19 folks, and people don't want to disbelieve the news media, but remember, I served in Vietnam. I learned in Vietnam that the news media is not to be trusted. Just a short story about that. I was in a building that housed a whole bunch of military officers of all branches of the military, and I would go up to the top floor and for our dining hall, and would eat with different ones, and had friends who were in all different branches, and so I would know about different skirmishes that friends in the Marines and the Army particularly they'd come back and I'd say, well, how was your day? Well, I was out in such and such a place, and we got shot at, and then the next week I'd read about these skirmishes in Time magazine, and it wasn't at all what, except for the place names, everything was different. And I'd say, what's this about? And they'd say, well, I know what happened. I was there, then I'd talk to friends that were in the public relations part of the military, and they'd say, well, this is what we were told to report. So what was being reported and what actually happened were different. And that was back in the 1960s. So I've known for a long time that what we were being told and what actually happened were two different things. And that's been going on for a long, long time. So it just didn't surprise me. And it's still going on right now. What we are being told is about what's happening in the Middle East, and what's actually happening are different things. I don't know what's actually happening. I just know that what we're being told is not what is actually happening, because we haven't been told the truth for a long time. What we were told about 9/11 and what actually happened are not the same thing. And so it wasn't a surprise for me, although it was shocking. The actual event was shocking. So I'll get off my high horse there.
No, you stay right on the high horse. I agree with you completely. I was a college kid when it happened, and I had seen the movies of history and some of the stuff that you're talking about portrayed to a certain extent. There seems to be a limit to which we can acknowledge problems within our own system, and then you don't cross those limits. I had known that. And the only thing I can compare my 9/11 experience to is car accidents. I've been in a car accident, and luckily nobody was hurt. I wasn't driving. It was one of these things where the car gets spun around and all this action's going on during the snowstorm. And it seems like time slows down during it, and you're not paying attention to every single detail. And I guess, like, when watching 9/11 in a hypnotic trance almost, like the rest of the world, watching the buildings come down, it didn't even occur to me to ask whether or not the jet plane impacts could even do that. I just kind of took it for granted that, of course, it was like you're watching a movie on television. A lot of people in my classes the next day actually made that reference. It's like watching something in a movie. And I'm not saying it didn't happen. I mean, but I'm saying that, like, it was just something like it's so removed from yourself if you're not actually there. And I give myself the excuse of, well, I was just a dumb college kid, but professionals, structural engineers, architects, folks that build these buildings, seemingly, it seems like they should have picked up on this, but a large part of them were right in the same haze as me, with the exception of yourself. And that's why I wanted to know that the answer, or if anybody tried to raise any kind of technical argument, because I think people just sort of went along to get along in the days that followed.
I also remember when a World War II bomber in, I don't remember when it was, late 40s, early 50s, flew into the Empire State Building on a foggy night. And the Empire State Building is still there. It was at nighttime, so fortunately there weren't very many people in the building, just cleaning crews. People in the airplane were killed, but it damaged the building. Did fairly considerable damage to the building, but it didn't destroy it. It didn't fall. And I remember that, and then I remember when it was announced that the World Trade Center towers were going to be built, I asked the question of myself, well, what about an airplane flying into this? This is going to be down at the end of Manhattan Island, out sort of exposed, not on the center of the island, surrounded by other high-rise office buildings, but down there at the tip of the island. And it could be easily run into by and it was, that was a question that lots of people were asking, and it was said, oh no, it's designed to withstand 707. In fact, I think somebody said it was designed to withstand the impact of two 707s, which was the biggest airplane available at that time. So, and I remembered all of that, and on 9/11, and thinking, okay, well, the buildings will withstand that. It's okay. And then when they started falling, I thought, okay, that's not because of the airplanes. That's because of something else. And it was clear to me that it was an implosion. Of course, the news media, it was also clear in looking back at it that it was the story was planted in the people's mind, and our news media has never allowed it to change, which is part of the reason for our resolution. It's been extremely disturbing to me. I have written letters to each of the major architectural magazines: Architect, Architectural Record, Building. I can't remember the other ones. Asking them why they haven't reported ever on the building collapses, and why did the buildings collapse, and why no investigation of the reason for the collapses. No reporting at all on those failures, and it's a failure of our profession that hasn't happened, and it's a failure of the American Institute of Architects, as far as I'm concerned, which is why we have a resolution coming up next month at the convention, asking the board of directors of the AIA to join us in asking for an investigation. We've written a different kind of resolution this year. Last year was our first resolution, and we got sort of blindsided last year because we really didn't know what we were up against. And we did Ted Walter on our staff did a very good job of writing the resolution and researching what it takes, but we didn't realize the nature of the opposition within the staff and within the board of AIA. They just don't want to do this. They don't want to look at, and it's not only our resolution. Other resolutions that they didn't want to deal with, they dealt with the same way. So our resolution this year is 2.5 pages long, and it's very detailed. Anybody that reads through the whole resolution has no doubt whatsoever that this is not a building collapse, and it's all about Building 7. It doesn't mention the Twin Towers at all. It's all about Building 7. Excuse me.
And I just want to jump back to the Twin Towers for 1 second, because you were talking before about the day of 9/11, how they were built to withstand it. While you were talking, I found this article. I cite this article a lot on this show because it's kind of, I want to say it's sort of like a bipolar article. It's saying how the buildings were built to withstand the airplane impacts, but then it's saying, well, but these were unusual circumstances because they were hit by an airplane. So it's almost like it's giving mixed messages, at least that's my interpretation, and trying to explain essentially what people saw that day. But the last paragraph says, sightseers at the towers over the past few years would have seen a reassuring information panel at the top floor visitor center explaining how they should not worry about plane crashes as the building was made to withstand them. So you are absolutely right. It's something that should have been looked into right from day one. Architects and engineers, people who should be in the know, who we train to be aware of these things and cite these things. I mean, maybe they didn't expect to be put in the middle of a controversy like this, but that's what life is all about. Those curveballs at you. They should be speaking up. Now, I want to talk about the AI resolution because that is the big thing that's going to be going on. You mentioned how it's coming up very soon here and what it's going to be asking for. But let's jump back a year and dig a little bit deeper. What did you think about some of the arguments put forth by the people opposing the resolution during the business meeting? What was your interpretation?
Well, one of the arguments that surprised me greatly was that there was it was going to cost the AIA hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this investigation, and of course, we're not asking the AIA to do an investigation at all. And so that was completely misinterpreted, or it was purposely misinterpreted to throw people off. And that bothered me greatly. The thing that bothered me most was that it became clear that this organization that is supposed to be an organization of professionals has been snookered or sidetracked by a political argument, and so that they have been swayed by something that's political when they should be looking at things professionally. So that we should be looking at the destruction of 3 towers, or in the case of the resolution, the destruction of World Trade Center 7, from a professional viewpoint. We should be looking at it professionally. What caused this building to collapse? Why did a building, and if we go with NIST's reason for its fall because of office fires, why did a building from fire collapse when no steel frame office tower has ever collapsed because of fire? Why did it collapse because of fire? Why haven't we looked at that professionally? And obviously we're not looking at that. And why aren't we looking at that? Well, it must be because we're afraid of it politically. And that is something that came out over and over in one way or another in the arguments. And that, to me, is a dereliction of duty on the part of the professional organization of architects. And I brought that out in my closing statement, but the rules and regulations for the way discussion goes in the business meeting is that you don't have very much time, and I am not a good debate person. So, something comes up and an argument is made, and maybe 3 days later I think, oh, I could have said that. Well, instead of 3 minutes later, I could have said that. So, and we just didn't know what to expect last year. We're going to be better prepared this year. We're going to have people better stationed in the room to line up at different microphones to counter arguments and have prepared statements. But the thing we just didn't expect last year. We didn't expect that it was that non-professional argument that came against us that was totally unexpected, and we're preparing for that this year. So we'll be, and one thing that's already happened, I've had a phone call from AIA staff asking if I wanted to shorten the resolution because it is long, and it's long purposely because it explains an awful lot of what happened to World Trade Center 7. Well, the reason it's long is because we want anybody that reads it to know what happened to the building. And I'm thinking, well, they don't want it to be long because they don't want all that explanation there. So, but I want it there. I want it to be long, and Ted, who basically wrote it with a little bit of help from me, said, we want it long. We want it to be full of detail, so that those the people that read it know what we're talking about, and they'll have a better understanding. Because I would guess that maybe 20% of the people in this business meeting will know that Building 7 fell on 9/11, and the rest of them won't. So 80% of the architects in that room won't know anything about Building 7.
Well, see, and that's part of the problem with that kind of debate format, because everybody gets like 5 minutes to go up and make a statement. You can prepare what you're going to say, but if somebody goes up and throws out some ridiculous assertion or claim or lie or whatever, then you have to throw out what you were going to say to address the ridiculous claim, and then your time gets up before you can get to what you needed to talk about for why this matter was important in this case. The resolution is so important. So there's no back and forth to say, no, it's not going to cost the AIA money. That's a lie. No, that's an emotional argument. That's not really a scientific debate. So let's get back to it. You can't do that. And the fact is that it's not even like 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there and 5 minutes back to person A and then back to person B, because it's all cycling through that it's a new person each time. So they can just go up there and claim that anything, just make any kind of claim, any kind of emotional argument. And you either have to have the next person rebut it by throwing out whatever they were prepared to talk about for the merits of the resolution, or just move on and ignore the ridiculous assertion and let that sit in people's minds. I think it's a very difficult and debate format when you're dealing with something as controversial as this.
It is. The other thing that what you just were talking about brought up in my mind was that there's supposed to be a time limit on discussion, so that each person, and this is supposed to be true for discussion of all the different resolutions. Well, there were, 5 or 6 resolutions that were discussed before our resolution came up last year. And some of the discussion went on for long periods of time, and people got to talk for 7 or 8 or 10 minutes, and when they were supposed to be limited to 2 or 3 minutes. And then all of a sudden we get to talking about our resolution, and they say, well, we're running out of time. You're not going to be able to talk but for 2 minutes, which is what everybody is supposed to have been limited to. And I thought, we get to the one that's really controversial and they don't want to talk about, so we're all of a sudden limited. And I, felt very put upon by that. But we were, in fact, running out of time, and the business meeting was going to run over. And so somehow all of that needs to be addressed. I don't know quite how to do that, but we're talking about that.
Well, no, that's another good point, is how out in the open the suppression of it is. And it's not something where they will say, because we figured out that if we get enough people to sign on to this resolution, we can get it out there and debated. So they'll look for other ways. They'll let people argue and bicker over something less important for most of the time, and then have it go to the very end and just give you very little time. It's kind of a weak way of oppressing the issue, I guess, for lack of a better way of describing it, so that they don't have to actually say no to you.
Yeah, that's a very good way of saying exactly what happened last year.
What do you think about the emotional arguments? So the one that sticks out with me, I guess everybody at AE has some memory from this. I wasn't at the conference last year, but I watched the arguments on video. And somebody went up there and said something to this extent. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he said, I was there and I had an office in one of the towers, and can't we just put this behind us? And people clapped because that's emotional and it tears at the heartstrings, but it's not a scientific argument. That argument means nothing. That does absolutely nothing for the debate, other than just get a bunch of people who probably the majority of them are already against the idea of looking into this issue to clap. I just want to get your interpretation of that argument. Let's just move on because I was there.
I distinctly remember that, and that's something that a lot of people sort of feel that way. Well, if you're thinking about thinking about a tragedy and you're trying to figure out why a tragedy happened, then you don't push it off and push it into the trash can. You try to figure out why the tragedy happened. Building 7 collapsed. Let's figure out why it collapsed. Now, we think very clearly that it didn't collapse because of office fires. It's pretty clear to me that it didn't. That wasn't the reason. But let's get some real scientific investigation and figure out why. Now, that's going to get into some places that step on some people's toes. Okay? That's going to ruffle some feathers. That's going to be hard to take. Well, that's okay if we can figure out something. Okay? There's this video that I've just become aware of where Larry Silverstein is talking about the building of the new Building 7. And he talks about figuring out all the things that caused the old Building 7 to collapse and the things that needed to be changed. Well, I am not aware of any investigation that showed why the old Building 7 collapsed the way it did and the building code changes. Well, if that has really happened, then let's find that information. But to me, that hadn't been done. I'm not aware of any building code changes, if there have been any. We need to do that, and part of all of that is opening up those old wounds so that we can figure out stuff. If there's an airplane crash, then we investigate and we figure out why, and and it might be hard on the people on the families who's lost loved ones, but you got to do it. You got to figure it out. Some of our biggest supporters for A&E 9/11 Truth are the families that lost loved ones, because they want the truth to come out. And that was actually, I think that was said by somebody at the meeting last year that yes, some of our supporters are family members and they want the truth to come out. This is not something that we want to get beyond. We need to find out why. One of the stories that I told as part of my presentation was several years ago. There were 2 skywalks in a atrium lobby atrium in a hotel in Kansas City that collapsed during a dance contest, and a number of people were killed, and the lobby was closed, and there was a long investigation into why these skywalks were collapsed and what happened, and it was heavily reported in the architectural press, and eventually they figured out what happened, and there were drawings and there were photographs and everything, and I still remember that, and when I was still practicing architecture and checking shop drawings, I still remembered to look at structural steel shop drawings with that investigation in mind, because somebody checking shop drawings for those skywalks had not done a good job and had missed a connection that, and if they checked it and had seen a design error, those skywalks would not have collapsed when all those people were on it. And that kind of reporting has never been done for World Trade Center. And we need that. We need that kind of investigative reporting. We need that kind of investigation, and it for the good of the profession. Why that's not obvious to lots of people? It's to me it's got to be because they're scared. They're somebody has said you don't go looking at that. Somebody has said no, you're not going to go look, or like the person that you brought up that, let's put that behind us. They just don't want to think about it anymore. Well, we got to think about it. We've got to look at it. It's going to bring up stuff we don't want to look at, but we've got to do it.
Well, and my question is, why do professional organizations like the AIA even exist if you're not going to look into something like this? We've said it a lot of times on the show, and I don't know if you're familiar with this argument that we've made, but when I brought Dale Pierce on here, who is a volunteer with AE, he's a former firefighter, we realized that, according to the official story, a few thermally expanding beams can bring an entire steel frame high-rise down in 7 seconds. And so, even though the firefighters were not present inside Building 7 on the day of 9/11 when the building came down, I think it's because, some engineer came and talked to the fire chief. They've said that, even though the fire hadn't reached that part of the building where the collapse initiated yet. Or supposedly initiated. But I think it's also because they just watched these 2 towers come down and kill a bunch of firefighters, and I think they're a little bit more hesitant. That would be my opinion. But regardless, had they been in there fighting these very fightable fires, when the building came down, they'd have died. And so in the future, you could have a high-rise, a few thermally expanding beams, according to NIST, can bring the whole structure down, and could kill firefighters, according to this new reality, who are fighting fires in a steel frame high-rise. So we have a safety hazard now. And this is something that AIA needs to address as a professional organization. If it doesn't, then why is there even an AIA? Do they exist simply to take dues and hand them over to Bill Clinton to come speak at a conference and feel like we're successful because we have an important political person here and we clap and we go home? I mean, and I don't mean to sound too sarcastic here, but if you're not addressing this horrible structural failure of a building that was not even hit by an airplane, why are you even meeting? Why do you even exist to begin with?
That's a very good point. Yeah. I mean, we've got to look at those difficult questions, and that's a very important point for our organization, and that's why that's why we have a booth at the convention. And that's why we bring this resolution up, and And I think we've got a much better resolution this year, and I think we'll have a much stronger argument. We've got 97 co-sponsors, and I think we'll have a much stronger argument. I think we'll be more. I would hope that we could get a favorable vote. I really don't anticipate it, quite truthfully. I think it'll take some more years before we can do that. But who knows? You know, we've got a changing political scene in the country. We've got people that are waking up and becoming more aware, so maybe it'll happen. Who knows? You know, we're asking folks to talk to their local chapters and ask them to spend time considering the resolution, and so we'll see what happens.
Now, why do you think it's so important to keep focused on Building 7? Sometimes people ask us, why not include the towers? They were obvious controlled demolitions, too. Why are we keeping it focused on 7?
Well, I think it's important because, number one, Building 7 was not hit by an airplane, and so it takes away that trigger, so to speak. And number two, there was not a raging fire in any sense of the word. The videos that we have of Building 7 show some fires, but they're confined to just small parts of one floor here and another floor there. So the damage to the building that you can see is much less, and so that's the reason. It's sort of a standalone thing. When you have the airplanes hitting the buildings, you know, for the layperson, I don't care how many times you say it can't be the airplane. In the back of their minds, it's going to be the airplanes are going to have a considerable impact on that. You know, I've got friends that I went to college with who are engineers. Not any of them structural engineers, but smart people, and you know, and I say, wait a minute, the airplanes didn't really have anything to do with it, and you know, the fires, and they say, oh no, it had to be some of that. It had to be the airplanes had to have some trigger mechanism in there. It had to be part of that. They just can't get around the idea that didn't have a key part of it. So if you take that out of it, and which you can do with Building 7, and the other thing about that is that the videos that show the collapse of 7, you don't have an explosion that starts it. All of a sudden, the building just starts falling, starts just sinking into the ground, so to speak. And you go, whoa, what's going on here? How did that happen? Well, it's not because of fire.
No, and for the reason I said before, is that we got a major safety hazard, if you want to believe the official story. So what is the AIA going to do about that? Why wouldn't you investigate that? What else do you have to do other than investigate the greatest structural failure in modern history?
It's not that we're asking them to investigate. We're just asking them to agree that an investigation needs to be done.
Exactly. Exactly.
We're not asking the AIA to investigate. We're asking them to to call for an investigation.
Now, do you think that there is greater awareness in the general public of this issue now, here 15 years later?
Yeah, but that's a relative thing. It's really hard for me to say because obviously I'm close to it and my mind's on it a lot, and I talk to my brothers and sisters, I talk to my friends, and for the most part, they don't think about it. It's not top of mind for them. They don't really pay very much attention. So I don't know whether people think about it a lot more or not. That's hard for me to say.
Now, what do you think about these arguments that people sometimes put up that it was 15 years ago, why do you still care about this? Why can't you just put it behind you, move on? Each day is a new day, and just, forget about the everything that you see there. What do you think about people, the arguments that they put up like that?
Well, my number one answer to that is that we have a war going on in the Middle East that is still going on, that was triggered by 9/11, and as long as we are not, we haven't gotten to the truth about 9/11, we're not going to get. We're still going to be fighting those wars. Until we get to the truth of 9/11, we're going to be mired in those wars. I think once we get to that truth, the people in this country are no longer going to be willing to put up with those wars. As you said at the beginning, I am a veteran of the war in Vietnam. If you think back to what started our entry into the Vietnam War, and from a combat situation, and it was after I was there. I was there as an advisor before we were there in a combat situation. There was something called the Gulf of Tonkin, where a North Vietnamese patrol boat theoretically fired a torpedo at one of our destroyers, and that caused us to declare war, and that was a lie. And we spent 10 years and over 55,000 lives fighting in that war. That was 55,000 American lives and over 1 million Vietnamese lives and lives of Australians and New Zealanders and British, and it was a mess, and it was all based on a lie. Well, we're in another war that's gone on for 15 years, almost 15 years, and it's based on a lie. And we can't keep doing that. We have to stop living our lives based on lies. We have to stop that kind of stuff. So we've got to get rid of living by lie. And so we get to the bottom of the lie of 9/11. And the other thing is that we find out for sure. We look at and we get an investigation, and we find out what, in fact, happened with the World Trade Center buildings. Why did they collapse? What, in fact, happened? What is the real thing that happened? Let's don't have fuzzy thinking, missed investigations that weren't really investigations. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's not have 9/11 commissions that don't ask real questions and cover up the answers and talk to the people that were the instigators or that might have been the instigators, and not let them get by without having to to answer questions under oath. And let's get to the bottom of things and hold people accountable. If we need to change building codes, let's change building codes. If we need to change the way we're building buildings, let's do it. But we need to find all that out and be real about it. But we can't just walk around in limbo for the next 15 years or 20 years. Or life is too important to go around living in a fog and pretending that we know what reality is when we really don't know. We have to, or we should. I can't say we have to. My wife keeps saying that we don't have to do anything. We should want to live by the truth. We should want truth in our lives, and we want to live honestly, and I don't think we're doing that now, and I'm quite sure we're not doing that now, and this is part of what we're not doing, is we're not facing up to the truth of what happened on 9/11, and not just with the World Trade Center. And we need to know that. All that needs to come out, and that's what an investigation will lead to. And we're just talking about a little bitty part of that investigation with the reasons for the collapse of 3 buildings in the World Trade Center. Why did they collapse? How did they collapse? What was the mechanism that brought them down? How did those, to me, it clearly couldn't have been fires. So what was it? If it was explosives, what kind of explosives, and how did they get planted, and over what period of time, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of unanswered questions, all of which haven't been asked, much less answered. So, and that's why we need to get this investigation.
And I think that fire siren behind you is a good signifier, maybe the universe putting punctuation on what you're saying. Dan lives near a fire station. I didn't put that in as a sound effect. But in our last couple of minutes here, and you really put this well, of why this is so important. I know you're going to represent AE greatly at this business meeting this year. For the people at home who don't necessarily have time to be activists, who don't have time to help out in many ways, but can help out in simple ways, how can the people listening help us out with this new resolution this year?
For those that are architects, contact your architects who are members of AIA. Contact your local chapter and ask them to seriously look at the resolution and to get behind and support the resolution. For those that are not members of AIA, to nevertheless write a letter in support of the resolution to the local AIA organization, whether it be the local city organization or the state chapter. For engineers, we've got just as much stubbornness on the part of the National Structural Engineering Organization as we do with the National Architects Organization. And just for regular citizens, write to your congressman, write to your senator. Ask them to look at this situation. Ask them to become aware of the fallacy. I cannot imagine in my wildest dreams that we have members of Congress who are not aware of the questions of 9/11 that have not been answered. Either they are completely blind to the reality, or they know that there are unanswered questions, and they just choose not to not to pursue those. To do their duty as a representative of the people and a seeker of truth, to go after that. One of the issues that's before the Congress right now is something called 28 pages, which AE 9/11 Truth is not really involved in, but it's about 9/11 and about the reports on 9/11, but it's just stuff that has to be looked at and needs to be looked at, and one of the things that's happened in the political circus that's going on is that Donald Trump, when Jeb Bush was still in the running, he happened to mention that Mr. Bush's brother was president during 9/11. Well, that's true. That brought that up, and lots of people got disturbed by that. Well, why get disturbed about that? It's true that George W. Bush was president when 9/11 happened. Well, he was. So let's talk about that. He was responsible. The buck stops there, as Harry Truman said when he was president. So let's go back to George W. Bush and talk to him about, well, what did he miss? Let's bring all this up. Let's ask the questions, people. Bring it up. Talk to your so-called political leaders and try to get them involved in this. We've got the 15th anniversary coming up, the year of accountability. Let's start getting people accountable.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. It's been a really quick hour for me. Dan, like I said, I know you're going to represent us well at the AIA conference, so good luck. I'll probably be going to it this year myself, but we'll keep everybody updated on the resolution, and thank you so much, Dan, for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Certainly. Thank you, Andy.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.